Hi, everybody. It's my great joy and privilege to introduce this year's Life Achievement Award recipient, Rita Moreno. I have been so in love with this woman for a long, long time, and we'll get into that. But she's a great lady with an extraordinary history and a talent that endures now and also is timeless, and we'll get into that too. But Rita, I'm so glad that you're the recipient this year, and it's great to be able to chat with you this way.
You're glad. You should have seen my house when I got the word. Actually, I was in the car driving when you called, and you mentioned this, and I couldn't quite take it in. I said, let me call you back.
Before I go off the road.
Yeah, exactly. So, and now that we've got that over with, what's this thing about in love? I'm a dirty old lady. In my heart of hearts.
Before we get into your remarkable history, I will tell you one. We've chatted various times on sets. We've been involved, and we've never done a scene together, but we've been in some of the same projects. But there was one time I remember, and it was in New York, and I think it was at Orso. I'm pretty sure that was.
Probably, because I love Orso.
And it was the late 80s, and I was in a Broadway show that I couldn't wait. You know, if you're not really thrilled with what you're doing or with the show, you got to do it 8 times a week. It's not like, so I was a little down with that.
It's like a punishment.
Yeah, and I was a little cynical about it, and I mentioned that. And you were so positive, fiercely positive. You just really were basically saying, now look, this is what you do. You can always find joy in doing some of this. This is what we love. This is what we do. And you really kind of lifted me up in a way that was easy for you. It was just your real positive outlook, and it kind of helped me. It was a great reminder.
Well, that was nice of me. I remember seeing you there. I don't remember what the conversation was about.
It wasn't long. It was just that incredibly positive approach that you've always had. You've always had that great sparkle. I want to go all the way back, if I may. You know, part of this is, of course, in your memoir, but I always like hearing the earliest stuff. I know when you were a little child in Puerto Rico, before you came to New York, and your mother, and just talk a bit about, you know, the beginnings of your love for performing and how that happened.
The beginnings of my love for performance really started in Puerto Rico. I used to dance for Grandpa. I was 3, 4, and 5 years old, and he put on a record, remember records? And he'd say, Rosita, baila. And I would jump around the room and shake my little booty. I mean, we really are born with music in the Caribbean. And it's no accident that we and the black community have rhythm. Remember that pejorious kind of phrase, which is no longer that. Right. And I loved that. It just seemed to be the most natural thing in the world. I wasn't thinking then that I wanted to be a performer because I didn't even know what that was. I was too young.
Right.
But when my mother decided to come to this country, that's when a friend of hers said to me, saw me bopping around the apartment too, in our ghetto apartment, and said, I think Rosita has some dance talent. Let me take her to my dance teacher, who was a Spanish dance teacher. His name was Paco Cancino, who was related to Margarita Cancino, who later on became Rita Hayworth. And he thought I had some talent too. So that's how it really started. I couldn't have been more than 5 and a half years old. That's when it all happened.
I always wondered when you mentioned the change coming to New York, that you left a world of Technicolor, and now it was gray and dark in New York.
It was the contrast was absolutely shocking. First of all, my mother was quite young when she had me, and she did something that you never did in Puerto Rico, a Catholic island. She divorced my father, who was unhappily a philanderer, and she made a decision on her own that she wanted life to be better for her and for me. And she did something astonishingly brave after the divorce, which was pretty brave then. She left me with him and took a ship to this country in that instance being New York City, USA. and not speaking a word of English. In a way, my story is really her story. She was so amazingly brave. And she stayed with an aunt in a ghetto apartment, got a job sewing in a sweatshop because for whatever reasons, a lot of Hispanic women and Caribbean women are wonderful at needlework and sewing. Mm-hmm. And she did that for a number of months until she had made enough money and learned enough English to take that ship back to Puerto Rico to retrieve me. And we came back on a ship called the SS Carabobo, which is a hilarious name in Puerto Rico because it means stupid face.
Stupid face.
Not a good omen to be on a ship called the SS Stupid Face. And we ran into a hideous storm at sea. So that what should have taken maybe a day and a half or maybe 2 days to get to New York Harbor took more like 4 days because of the storm.
Do you remember it?
Oh, I remember
it's clear because you were
vividly. It's in the book. I remember vividly. And you know, we Puerto Ricans have many, many wonderful qualities, but one of the qualities that really makes us stand out is our gift for panic. I mean, you never saw so many Puerto Ricans getting religion in your life when this thing started to bob up and down like a cork. And it was very, very scary. But we finally got to New York Harbor. I saw this lady with the torch. Yes. And I asked my mother, I said, Mami, ¿quién es esta mujer tan grande? And she told me about this lady who was inviting everyone to come live here and to be nurtured and taken care of and all that kind of stuff, and people who are homeless and poor and hungry. And I remember thinking at the time, I think we're overqualified. I mean, we were really very, very poor. But I remember that the lady to me was just killer because I thought she was holding a huge ice cream cone. and then I decided, oh my goodness, a lady runs this country. A little prescient, but you know what? It seems to be coming, doesn't it? Anyway, the shock of this hideous weather, which was February. February in New York is brutal. I mean, the Ides of March are fast upon us also. And it was a shock. I couldn't understand why my mother said this was going to be a better life. I couldn't understand her reasoning because I froze. And it was gray. It was all concrete. I remember seeing one cat. We were in the bus on the way to the ghetto in the Bronx to stay with my mother's aunt, Titi. And I remember seeing one cat who looked kind of ashy. And I couldn't understand, having just come from this green paradise, what had happened to the trees because there were no leaves on them. I had never seen a tree.
Bleak.
With no leaves.
That's
and I
right.
said, what happened to the trees? She said, oh, they'll come back.
February in New York.
Yeah.
Gray and
she
bleak.
said, this is a thing called winter.
So now you're a young girl. Would it be fair to say that the dancing, and I assume you started singing just because you
just because I did.
Because you did.
Yeah.
Was that your outlet in a way that was your area of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but imagination?
I understood very quickly when I did my very first performance, which was at a Greenwich Village nightclub with my dance teacher, Paco Cancino, who was not a whole lot taller than I was. Mm-hmm. And he partnered me in a Spanish dance, and we danced with the castanets. And when I saw the smiles on people's faces, so it wasn't just Grandpa, and when I heard the applause, I thought, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I made a 5-year-old decision that has never changed. I loved the attention. I still love the attention. And anybody who tells you otherwise is full of it.
Well, it's your nature, and it comes through.
It is
part
my
of what
nature.
Makes you. All right, so now tell me about, I know some of this, but I like hearing it from you. The first significant job for you, the first professional job, or some of the things that happened in between. It could have been something in school. I just love these, you've already spoken to it, these kind of milestones, but the early ones, before anybody knows.
The very early ones started with bar mitzvahs. I don't know why bar mitzvahs, but there they were. I was being booked by my dancing school in New York, and I would go there and do my Carmen Miranda imitation. My mother made my costumes, And I had the fruit salad hat, and the people thought I was adorable. And that
And
made,
how old are you by now? 10, 11,
Oh,
12,
gosh.
something.
I was about 10.
Yeah, okay.
And actually, it started before then, I think 8 or 9. And we'd be getting money for it. We'd get $10, $15. That was pretty fabulous. And then after that, my first experience when I was 13, I did my first Broadway show. And that I was in for some surprises in that one. I was 13, passing for 11, playing a 9-year-old, because I was always petite, and I never did look my age from the time I was a little kid. I always
And
looked
this
younger.
was in?
You expect a date from me? I don't remember dates.
No,
Oh.
the show.
Oh, the show. Good. I'm glad you're not looking for dates. This was in a show called Sky Drift, which opened and closed overnight. But I played a little Italian girl. It's an interesting experience because I played a little Italian girl whose mother is, according to the family, having hallucinations. In fact, it was a play about 3 young men in World War II who have died and are coming back for one last visit with their families. We were the Italian family, and there was an American family, and there was an Irish family. And my mother is talking to the air, it seems, in this scene, and it's very sad. And I saw a lot of people. This was a preview, about 3 days before we opened. And I saw that the people were shifting in their seats a lot and coughing. And I got it, boy, I tell you, I missed showbiz because I thought, they're not happy. I don't know why, but they need something. This is awful. They need something to distract them. So I took some spaghetti from my plate, because it's an Italian family, and I started to suck up a long strand of spaghetti while my mother, in tears, is talking to my dead brother. But why you're not here anymore, darling? Aldo, I love you so much. I go, sucking up a strand of spaghetti. And of course, people began to giggle, at least the ones in the front rows. Well, that went fine, I thought. The curtain comes down because there were 3 acts, 3 families. And the leading lady of that particular act catches me in the wings, Lily Valente. I'll never forget her name. She was a wonderful character actress of that time. Took me by my scrawny little neck and shook me and said to me, if you ever do that again, I will hear about it no matter where I am, and I will find you, and I will kill you. Wow. So that's how I learned that you don't upstage people. You don't do things while they're doing their thing. It was a hard lesson because I thought, well, gee, I thought I helped the scene. I really was ignorant. I didn't know about theater. I'd never seen a play. These plays, I really had so little theater experience simply because everything closed so quickly.
But you're getting experience now.
I'm getting some. And I'm working with some wonderful actors, and I'm listening a great deal and learn and absorbing as much as I can.
Right.
Didn't occur to me to go to an acting class because I just don't think any Puerto Rican kid of that time knew there was such a thing. Really.
But you were
we had
dancing,
dance
you were
That's
performing,
different.
you were singing, you were
we
still
had
performing.
dance class,
Right.
and I sang just because I liked to sing, and I had a good voice. But acting class never even occurred to me. So whatever I did was instinctive, and as you see from my first experience, very inexperienced. But I loved it. I loved what I was doing. I was doing radio a lot then. And I did the Ave Maria hour, a Catholic. I love these stories. I'm glad you're asking me. I love the Ave Maria hour because inevitably at one point I played Bernadette.
Oh, yes.
Bernadette, who saw the visions in the grotto.
Right.
And I remember that particular episode of the Ave Maria hour where I have to say, But I tell you, I saw this lady in the grotto with the blue veil. They get that child out of here. She's mad as a hatter. Don't you love that?
I do.
I did an amateur hour. It wasn't Major Bowes, but I did amateur hours where I sang my Spanish songs and played my castanets. I was busy.
Next role. I love the way you're
Right.
taking this all in. Now you're a young teenager.
Now I'm in about 16, and I'm playing in a play with, I think that was, Senor Chicago was that last play with the same leading man, Alfred Ryder.
Yes.
Who at this point, remember Alfred Ryder?
Yeah, no.
No kidding, wow.
Well, I mean, I know who he was.
Well, the little girl he saw in Skydrift, and the young teenager he saw at 16 in Senor Chicago was a whole nother bag of stuff.
Right.
And he was very, very interested. He was a dirty guy. He loved young women.
Well,
And what do you mean, well?
well, I'm sympathetic. If it's you, I'm very sympathetic.
Oh, okay. And that's the one, that closed practically overnight. The one after that, which took many years, was Elmer Gantry. And that's when I was in my very early 20s, and I played Sister Sharon.
Now, who played Elmer Gantry? I know this, but
Robert Shaw,
it's Robert
the English
Shaw.
actor,
Interesting.
who
Sure.
was
He's
wonderful.
a terrific actor.
He was wonderful until, he shocked everybody because he really had a singing voice.
Right.
And one too many people said to him, it's interesting how vulnerable and fragile we are, we actors. One too many people said to him, how do you do that? You've never taken a singing lesson in your life. Your pitch is wonderful. Your time is great. And that was his death knell. He began to sing badly. He began to lose his sense of rhythmic musical time.
Started to think about it too much.
Exactly, because he probably went home and said, how do I do that? That kind
Right.
of thing. And by the time we opened, he got nailed terribly by the critics for something that he had naturally. He was wonderful as Elmer Gantry. And I thought I was a swell Sister Sharon.
I'm sure you were.
But again, one night. That's the story of my life. I should call it the book, One Night Only.
You know who was like this? I remember him talking about it was Jimmy Coco.
Oh, one of my best friends.
Well, Jimmy Coco had been in, it seemed to me the number was 17 Broadway shows, all of which were one-night flops. But he got so much experience, so he said that when he was finally in a hit, he was really seasoned,
But I'm sure he not only experienced, but I'm sure he also, I think he probably impressed people. He was
Yes.
one of those very natural, funny people.
Right?
I mean, that man made me wet my knickers more than anybody
So
I've
that even
ever
though it was a
met.
flop, people were going, yeah, but who's Jimmy Coco?
Yeah, but who's that kid?
Sure,
Who's that boy? Who's that man? And so, but the one thing that really broke my heart is that for Elmer Gantry, my agent sent me a bottle of champagne. And the following day, when the notices came out, they said, do not come back. And I said, well, I want to go to my dress. Yeah, come get your stuff. And somebody stole my bottle of champagne.
Oh.
I'd never had a bottle of champagne. It really broke my heart.
All right, what's next?
The next one is then, oh my gosh, then I did.
You can jump. You can just.
Well, I played, here's what was wonderful. This came after Hollywood though. I played Annie Sullivan in The Miracle Worker.
Oh, you did? Oh.
But it was the first time I had been allowed
Right.
to play someone who was not
It's
Hispanic.
not Hispanic. But that was later.
I was about, I'm guessing about 20. This was after some of my earlier Hollywood days. I still hadn't done West Side Story or anything like that, nothing big.
When was the first, let me just go back because I'm
Yeah.
not sure. When's the first time that you went to Hollywood?
I was 17.
You were 17.
I was 17 years old under contract to MGM Studios,
Right.
which was the studio of the dreams of any young person who sang and danced because it was the musical studio. Other studios made musicals, but none of them usually compared with MGM. MGM had Gene Kelly, Ann Miller, Judy Garland, Astaire, all of those
And
people.
Elizabeth Taylor. So tell me about that, because I know you were part of that, right? I mean, you encouraged that you were the
Well, I tried, I had no
the
role
Hispanic,
models.
earthy Elizabeth Taylor or whatever you were.
That's true. That's right. You got that from the book, right?
Right.
Because
But I think I knew it because of some of the pictures I'd seen before, because you really did have that. There was one famous Life magazine, or one of the,
the cover of Life.
yeah, the cover of Life.
But I made Elizabeth Taylor my role model because there weren't any
That's right.
for young Hispanic people. Forget girl, boy, man, woman. There was nobody. Dolores Del Rio was before my time. Lupe Velez, those were the only two big Spanish stars, were before my time. So there was no one. So I needed to find someone that I wanted to emulate, and it turned out to be Elizabeth Taylor. And indeed, some of the pictures kind of resemble her. I mean, she was a raving beauty. I was never a raving beauty. I was a
You get
pretty
to know her at
girl.
all because you're similar in a way. You're kind of straight shooter and say it like it is and all. Did you
Was she
ever get
like
to-
that?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I
Yeah.
thought you might have known her a bit, but I think
Well,
she
I
was
met
known
her
for that.
briefly when I was at MGM, and in a very humiliating way. I had dated Nikki Hilton, her ex-husband at that point. She had just recently divorced him, like about 4 or 5 months. And I was in a screening room at MGM. She was there. They always held screenings for the young people, just to make them familiar with acting and, to study all these
Right.
great actors who worked at MGM. And she was there, and I had never been introduced to her, and I still wasn't. She said, "You're Rita Moreno, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I understand you dated my ex-husband." And I went, "Oh, shit." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Is it true he threw you into the pool?" And I was in absolute misery. Number one, it wasn't true. And it made me feel very foolish. And that's what she wanted.
Uh-huh.
She was jealous. Yeah.
Meow.
And I'd never run into that before.
Oh.
I really went home very hurt, so embarrassed. But I must tell you, she was devastatingly beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she was outrageous. Beautiful. I met Clark Gable. My first day at MGM,
Hello, darling.
I met Clark Gable. I had already been assigned to a film called The Toast of New Orleans.
What was your first film?
My first film was an independent in New York.
All right, you were first under contract.
Under contract was Toast of New Orleans.
Toast of New Orleans.
With a then very popular young tenor named Mario Lanza,
Right.
who was big at the time.
I've seen that. Of course, I know this one, right?
Yeah.
And
Catherine
with,
Grayson.
and Catherine
It's-
Grayson. Right.
It's one of the Joe Pasternak's endless
It's
movies.
fun, that movie, because she doesn't see it coming and he's singing higher than she is. And she
Right,
is this great,
right.
Who is this guy?
Yes.
It's delightful.
Oh, you remember
And
that?
I do remember.
Oh, my
So that
gosh.
was the first as a contract.
That was my first, and I was thrilled beyond words. I spent every single day that I wasn't working on a film or in a scene on other sound stages, because now I could just go in. I get all dressed up, put on some cute little outfit and put on makeup, and go to the studio and visit. And I would spend hours and hours. I had nothing else to do.
Right.
Visiting sets, the Humphrey Bogart set, the Clark Gable set. I
Not
go to
bad.
MGM, the great musical studio of all time. I never got to sing, I never got to dance.
Not yet.
I mean, well, no, excuse me. I did do a dance, a big dance in Toast of New Orleans, but after that, I never got to sing or dance again, which is absolutely bizarre.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what year? I'm trying to do the math in my head. It's
Oh,
the
do it
50s.
because I can't. I don't remember
Well,
years.
it's the early 50s. It's the late.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
early 50s. Right. All right. So now, what's the next? And we don't have to all of them, but
I
kind
know.
of the build.
Then after that comes Pagan Love Song, a remake
Right.
of an old movie. This time, though, with Esther Williams and Ricardo Montalban in the lead, a brand new Latin lover. He had come from Mexico, and this was a big deal at the time.
He's a lovely man.
Oh,
I work with him. I liked him
you
so
know,
much.
everyone always says, and a true gentleman.
Yeah, he really was. Yeah.
Rita, how are you?
That's right.
Yes, very cordial.
Yes.
And he came to visit me because I was the only other Latina in the entire place, and probably in all of California as far as he knew. So when I was doing Toast of New Orleans, he came to visit me, and I showed him my dance. And we had a big fancy lift, and the boy lifted me up and turned me and fell on the floor with me, which was very, very embarrassing. Oh, God, I was in misery because I felt so proud of doing this dance. I was a Spanish dancer, remember. I'd never done this kind of MGM-type dancing up till that time. So
Well, you have your SAG card. You're
so
now under
I had my SAG
contract
card before.
from the independent
From
film.
the independent film, and I had done my very first time with a SAG card. Boy, it's like 60 years ago. I was doing an Army training film. I was an extra.
Right.
And I was an extra on a beach in a bathing suit. I don't remember what it was about because nobody told us. We were just extras, but I got my card.
You got your card.
Yeah. 60 years. I think it's 66, something like that.
All right, so now, all right, next film. I just want to...
Now the next film is, what did I say it was? The remake of
Pagan
Love Song.
Pagan Love Song.
And that was with not Fernando Lawas. That was with
Ricardo
Howard
Montt.
Keel.
Oh, right,
It was
right,
a
right.
musical.
Right.
And Howard, that was Howard's first film with that
Right.
beautiful voice of
With
his,
that
that
voice.
baritone. And I played, and then it started to hit me. I started to play these little dark-skinned girls where they would darken my skin and put black wigs on me.
Right.
And little sarongs and barefoot and all that kind of stuff. And suddenly, I wasn't wearing shoes too often anymore,
right.
which was so disconcerting. Right. And from there, I went to Latin Lovers. That was the film that Ricardo was doing as his very first film with Lana Turner.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a swell experience on that. I played his girlfriend until he meets Lana. And I get very jealous and all that kind of stuff. I didn't have a great deal to do. And one day on the set, the assistant director calls me over, and I was still Rosita. He says, Rosita, can you do me a favor for Miss Turner? I said, oh, of course. And he said, go to the wardrobe department. She forgot she left something there. And bring it back and bring it to her dressing room. I said, okay. And I go to the wardrobe department, and the wardrobe woman, with a very stern look on her face, hands me a little pouch. And she says, take this directly to Miss Turner's dressing room and do not open it.
She sounds a little bit like Lupe Velez, this one.
Well, I had to look and see what was in
Of course you did, of course.
It was a padded bra, and I was so thrilled. I was thrilled because I thought, oh, well, she's like the rest of us. I mean, they had me padded so much I bumped into the wall once and ricocheted. I mean, really, a lot of Goodyear rubber there. And had a wonderful time on that, but very little to do also.
Right.
Always going to other sets. I visited the Judy Garland set of Summer Stock like every day.
Right.
Just to be there.
Right.
And then, to my absolute amazement, Gene Kelly asked for me to do a small role in Singin' in the Rain,
Right.
a musical comedy. And a girl named Jean Hagen, who knew? A new young girl who was one of my cohorts, Debbie Reynolds. And, but he gave me the part of an American girl, Zelda Zander. And he wanted me to cut my hair. He wanted me actually to wear the hairdo that Sid Charisse wore in that fabulous musical number at the end.
Right.
That Slaughter on 10th Avenue type number.
Right, right.
That
Cut
Colleen
that way.
Moore,
Yep.
Guiche. But I said, oh, I can't cut my hair. And he said, excuse me, what is your name again? He was so astounded that he said, okay. So he put a red wig on me, and that's Zelda Zander. And that is the last film I did for MGM, and then I was dropped, which was the end of my life, I thought. Daddy didn't want me anymore. You know, that was a very patriarchal studio.
Oh, sure.
Mr. Mayor.
And then?
Then there followed, aside from many, many tears and heartbreaks, I didn't tell my mother for weeks. I just kept going to the studio every day and telling her I was visiting. I just I couldn't tell her. And finally I told her, of course. And then I started to do some television. And after that I began to do some regional theater, some summer theater, summer stock. And that's how it went for quite some time, until I ended up with another contract at 20th Century Fox,
Right.
based on not having anything to do with my talent, but a 1954 Life magazine cover. Show business is so bizarre.
Right.
Daryl Zanuck saw me on the cover of this magazine, and he said, "Who is that? Does she speak English? Get that girl." I mean, who says things like that?
Well, you're gorgeous, but anyway, go ahead. You know.
So that's what
Let's
happened.
not to forget that. You know, talent aside, there is that. You know, but so
well,
then you did.
I ended up under contract to MGM, and I did. I mean, no,
20th Century
20th
Fox.
Century Fox, and there I did just a few films. I did The Lieutenant Wore Skirts with Sherry North.
Right.
Sherry at the time was Fox's answer to Marilyn Monroe.
Right.
They were trying to find another blonde.
Yeah.
And Sherry was a dancer. She came from Broadway. And she kind of, sort of sang. So they put her in this film with, who's the leading man? He was so wonderful, that sad-faced, clown-looking man, who was in the Marilyn Monroe movie, The Girl Upstairs. What was that?
Tom Ewell,
Tom Ewell.
7-Year Itch.
7-Year Itch. So when I was given a role in that movie, I was doing a pastiche of her walk down the steps with Tom, which was supposed to be, you know, kind of an inside joke, and everybody was supposed to say, "Oh, I know what she's doing. She's supposed to be Monroe upstairs," and it worked. It was very funny.
Good.
And but the funniest part of that was going to Natasha Lytez, Marilyn Monroe's acting coach at Fox. She was famous as Marilyn Monroe's acting coach, who was always interfering with people.
Right.
And people that she was working with kept her way at arm's distance.
So this is before Paula Strasberg. Did she already had this?
She had.
Before going to New York and.
This is, yep,
Earlier.
Strasberg came way later.
Way later, but she had already the person who was
Natasha
interfering.
Lytez, this Russian woman, and I thought, and she became very famous as Monroe's coach, and intensely disliked by anyone on the set because she was always interfering and changing Monroe's performance. So they really kept her way at the end. You are not allowed, you know, on the set. So she had a marvelous thing that she did with Monroe to tell her that she wanted more sex into the scene, into her attitude. She would point to her crotch, and Marilyn was always watching her, and she'd go like this. I don't see anything. Come on, deliver. That's what she did. And I, thinking, well, she's her coach, I'm going to go to her and have her help me with this role, which is supposed to be Marilyn. I don't even know where you can use some of this, but you'll enjoy it anyway.
I'm enjoying it. We'll
You
figure
will
out what we
enjoy
can
it.
use.
Okay, so she says to me, she said, "Let me see you do the scene." So I come down the steps, and there's no steps, so I'm, you know, simulating steps, and I'm trying to be as sexy as I can. And I start to say my first line. She says, "No, no, no, no. I don't see anything. You have to be sexual. You're going to do Marilyn, you have to do it more sexual. Let's do it again." And I come down these pretend steps, and she says, "No, no, no." She said, "Look, pretend that you are holding a rose, a long stem rose between your legs, in your vagina."
Yeah, vagina. Oh, okay.
Yes. And I can tell you that my hairline went back about an inch when that word, the W word, came up. And she said, "Now do it." And I did, and it was very Monroe-ish. It was weird.
The key.
It's like, ooh, ooh.
Funny, funny. You figured out now how to be sexy, although I'm sure you've always been sexy, going all the way back to the spaghetti. But
Then I did The King and I, and here's the interesting part of getting the role in The King and I, which I've never forgotten. It stayed with me all this time.
was that a good experience? I want to talk about, because you're wonderful in The King and I, and I've seen it, and I love the musical.
It's a gorgeous movie.
You're wonderful in it. You're just wonderful in it, for all kinds of reasons we get into. And if I can just say this, I love watching films from back in a certain time, and certain performers are timeless when you watch them. Whatever the style is, they could be doing it right now. Right now in the year 2014, you put on a show, that performance. And you're like that. You're like that in a lot of things. You're like that in that.
Really?
You're like that in that. I mean, you're always very present and very real and very just enchanting. I wondered if it was a good experience. I hope it was, but
It was a wonderful experience.
good.
And it was a film where I got to meet an absolute genius, the only genius I've ever known, and that's Jerome Robbins. And in fact, I did his only 2 films. I did The King and I, and then I did West Side Story. Because of King and I got into West Side Story.
I always assumed
thanks to him.
That is what it is. I always
Well,
assumed
it had a great deal
to be that.
do with
Sure.
him. It had a great deal to do with him. But I'd never seen that kind of dancing in my life. He has such a unique dance vocabulary.
Right.
It was like nobody else's. Like Fosse had his own.
Right.
Jerry had his own, but Jerry, I think, was more varied. Fosse, after a while, you began to say, "Oh, that's a Fosse step."
That's right, Fosse.
You know, usually it had a lot to do with bumping and grinding and very sinuous, sensuous stuff. Jerry was all over the map.
He was very
did what I
literate too, wasn't he? He had lots of
very literate.
Yeah.
He also did character work for dancers. In other words, the steps that I would do, for instance, in West Side Story, he would only have choreographed those for Anita.
Right.
He wouldn't have given those steps to, I don't know, Bernardo or another character, woman character. They were specifically Anita character type steps. He choreographed for character. And where you see it really at its best and at its keenest is in the number Cool.
Right.
In the garage, when the boys are really scared and they're looking for they're looking for Tony and can't find him. They know they're in trouble. And there's this very disturbing dance number in the garage with a very low ceiling. Now, I don't know, when was the last time you ever saw a dance number that was intense and serious and neurotic and all kinds of... Who did numbers like that? Nobody.
Right.
Not Fosse, not anybody.
Yeah.
That, to me, is the best and most brilliant number in West Side Story.
It's Tony Mordente leading it, really, isn't it? Or part of it.
Well, Tony Mordente, no. Tony helped
Cool
to take
Boy.
over when he was Chita Rivera's husband.
I know, but Keep Cool Boy, isn't he a big part of that number?
No, he's part of it, but
Part
he's
of
not a
it, not
big
so
part
much.
of it.
Okay.
He played one of the Jets.
It's the bigger guy.
Can you
I guess.
imagine what it must have been like for Tony Mordente to see Rita Moreno playing his wife's role?
Well, let me ask you something. Because did Jerry Robbins ever talk to you about why he wanted you for Anita? It sounds presumptuous, but I think I know why.
No.
Well, I
That
think
was
I know.
never discussed. Her name never came up.
Well, here's why I think I think it's because, and you're beautiful and you're a wonderful dancer and have a wonderful natural, a lovely singing voice, but I think it's because you have this fire. It's there in King and I too, that sort of smoldering, win the moment, of pain and whatever. It's very real. You have that real Latino fire underneath, boom, and it comes out, and it's very real. It's not acted. And I like to think that he thought, that's what I want, because that's what we need for Anita, and you have that like nobody. It's why. That is why, and you look great dancing it. You're so sexy, but that's why you won the Academy Award, because the acting of that role holds up. Like I say, today it's terrific. If anything, it really, because West Side Story. I remember going to see it. At this point, I was a college kid or something. There are parts of it when you got to the movie that were a little silly, and I love musicals. It was but a little silly. And then there was the real stuff. Yeah. And yours, from beginning to end, was smoldering and and anguish, and also, it's a great performance.
But Ken, in fairness, I really had a great part.
It was a great part.
It's almost a scene steely kind of part.
But there are moments...
when anybody has to play a virgin, they are screwed. Right. I did Guys and Dolls with George Chakiris in Summer Theater. Ah. Well, he played Sky Masterson. I was Adelaide.
Of course you were Adelaide.
And we had, of course, and we had a young woman who's playing who was she? Miss, I forget.
You mean say Sarah Brown?
Sarah Brown, right. And I was watching them doing this stuff, and I thought, she's playing the Virgin. You can't do it. It's boring. So George, being a dear and close friend whom I truly love very much, he's very close to me, he's like family. I said, George, I want to meet you after rehearsal with whatever her name was. Let's go to the bar nearby and bring the script, and I want to talk to you about this. And mostly it was really her, and I said, look, you can't play this like an you've got to have a fire in there somewhere.
There you go.
That's what attracts Sky Masterson to this fiery, puritanical, but fiery sexual woman. You've got to, put some sexuality into it. And
do you tell her to take this rose and
I did not do the rose thing.
I just wondered.
I've never done that. Can you imagine? Somebody
Let me show you a trick.
Can you imagine my friend saying, say what?
I beg your pardon?
A rose where? So, but that's what happens when you play those pure, you know what Yul Brynner said to me, which was so interesting and on the money? I met him briefly before we were to start filming, and he said, I said, I'm so looking forward to this, I so admire your work, blah, blah. He said, okay. He says, let me talk to you. Let me tell you what I think ingenues serve, what purpose they serve in musicals. They are there for the ballads, where they yearn and they're boring.
Well, you weren't.
No. He had a point, but he had a point. They're always, where is he? What happened? Oh. And he said, you can't do that. He said, so I'm sending you to an acting teacher. I'll pay for it. And he said, he sent me to a woman, a German woman, who spoke English so badly that I could barely understand what she was saying. And I'll never forget the very first class I went to with her. I was supposed to have, about 3 weeks worth of, 3 times a week, sessions with her to get some gumption and some stuff for my Tupton character. And she says, I want you to on the Fontanez, only in the panda. And I said, excuse me? I want you to only in the panda. I couldn't. And I finally had to say to her, I remember flushing all the way up to my hairline. I was so at pains and embarrassed. I said, I'm sorry, I just don't understand what you're saying. And then she shouted it at me, because maybe if she said it really loud, I would understand, which of course it became more distorted. And I finally left there in tears. I never told Yul. I never went back. I didn't know where he found this woman. I don't know why he thought she was so terrific, because I couldn't understand her.
Obviously, I wanted to talk about West Side because it's a great work in the American musical theater. It was a terrific film. I know you mentioned Jerry Robbins. I know that towards the end, he was such a perfectionist, as I recalled. They let him go, and Robert Wise finished it.
But let me explain what perfectionist means in terms of Jerry Robbins.
Yeah, please do.
Perfectionist means never saying print it.
That's right. And you can't do that.
You can't. Now, when you're a perfectionist like he was, and you're doing group dances, everybody is not going to be perfect.
That's right.
At the same time, it is simply not possible. The closest you can come is the closest those kids came doing the film.
Right.
But it's just simply not possible. He would re-choreograph suddenly, and then you had to worry about matching. And I say this with such love and respect and admiration, because he was the only, as I said, the only genius I think I've ever worked with.
Right.
Mike Nichols wasn't bad either.
That's right.
But he made it very difficult for them, therefore he made it difficult for him. And when we went to work one morning, we were working on the Mambo at the gym, the competition between the two gangs at the gymnasium, the dance competition. We were told one morning, Jerry's not coming back, He's been fired. We were dumbstruck. There were tons of tears, cruel as it was to many people.
Right.
But you know, I would give my eye teeth. This minute, if he said, come work with me again, to work with him. He was a genius, but more than the genius, everyone says that. What was genius about him is that he brought out in you a creative streak that you didn't know existed in you, that goes beyond what you thought you were as a creative person. Jerry was able to mine that, tap into that.
And that had happened for you within the process.
With a vengeance. And with George Takiris, too.
Well, just a fan question, because I've seen that film, and the scene in the drugstore when you're attacked and all. I thought that I'm interested how that happened, because to me, it had a kind of a spontaneity and a improvisational quality to it that you don't
Did you see that? Did you see that?
I don't. There's something about that. I remember thinking that in the musical, because it's hard. Things can be a little too clean and too neat in musical. There was something very real that had nothing to do with the musical comedy that could have been in.
How interesting, because
and the way you are with it.
It is choreographed. I mean, it's a near rape scene, is what it really is.
Yeah, it is.
We called it the candy store scene. And by the way, I bet you never knew this, because there's so much happening you don't hear it. But you know what's playing on the jukebox when he turns it on? America. It's so ironic.
Great.
And
so it's choreographed, but it doesn't look so choreographed.
Jerry had those kids so head up.
Yeah.
He had them so primed that when they got to me, it became personal.
Right.
And that's the scene where Rita broke down, and we had to stop shooting for a while. He called in early lunch, because I just went to pieces. We'd done it over and over, where they're lifting my skirt and calling me Bernardo's pig and spick and all that. And, old wounds sometimes never really heal.
Right.
It's a thin kind of scab sometimes that sits on these kind of psychic and emotional wounds. And obviously that was one of them. And at one point in the middle of the scene, I just started to weep and sob, and I went to the candy counter, sat on a stool, put my head on my arm, and could not stop crying. And the boys felt awful. Like, oh my, Rita, we love you. Please don't cry, please don't cry. Oh my God, the audience is going to hate us. That kind of thing. I couldn't stop. And I would, calm down, and then I'd start crying again. So Bob, our director, just said, why don't we just have an early lunch and go to your room and relax and rest a little bit.
Well, it's a great scene. And part of the power, as you know, is when you pull yourself together.
Don't you touch
me. It's great. It's great.
But you know where I got that reading?
Don't tell me.
It's so interesting. I said to myself, how would Marlon say this?
I wondered if you were going to say.
Did you? Because normally, as it's usually said on stage, don't you touch me!
That's
that
right.
kind of thing. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to go way the other way? And they don't you touch me.
It was great.
And I'm telling you, I think that's what got me the Oscar, that one line.
Well, I think it's a lot, but certainly it's significant.
Because I was acting then, I wasn't just dancing and singing.
It was all of it.
This
It
was
was a great
like
performance.
From my kishkas.
All right, so now, here we are, and it's, because I can't wait to hear your version of
Oscar night.
And the winner is,
Oh my God. I have a couple of stories to tell you from
Go
that
ahead.
night. George was my date. As I said, we really, really were just nutty about each other. I loved him, but as brother and sister, I just adored him. And the film began to sweep the Oscars. George was the first, actually, in the evening to win Best Supporting Actor.
Right.
Best Supporting Actress is very near the end, when I think just before Sophia Loren won for Two Women.
Right.
And Maximilian Schell won for Judgment at Nuremberg. And so I had a long wait. When my name was called, I was ready to put on. Oh, look, here's another wonderful, ironic thing. In back of me is sitting Una Merkel. Una Merkel played the supporting role of the crazy mother in Summer and Smoke.
Right.
Which I was in also.
Well, she had a great long career, didn't she?
But I was in the same film at the same time that she was. I was making Summer and Smoke while I was doing West Side Story. I did 2 films at once.
Wow.
They really, for whatever reasons, I don't remember what they were, Paramount wanted me for the role of Rosa in Summer and Smoke. So a deal was made where when I had days off from West Side Story, I would go over to Paramount and play Rosa for Peter Glenville, the English director, in Summer and Smoke. And there's Una Merkel in back of me.
Such a trooper. Nobody would believe that while you're doing West Side Story, you were also doing another film.
Oh, I was exhausted.
I'll bet.
Anyway, when they called my name, because I thought, really, at that point, we'd won everything. And at that point, like a good Puerto Rican, I thought, well, my luck. I'll be the only one who doesn't get the Oscar. I have to put on my bravest face. Rock Hudson calls out my name. I get up. My mom grabs me from the back. I invited my mom, which was so wonderful. And I hurried down because I was way back. And I said to myself, don't run. It's undignified. Mm-hmm. Because I had seen many famous actresses run to reach the stage before the applause stopped.
That's right.
Right? And I said, it doesn't matter if the applause stops, don't you run. And I didn't. And of course, the movie was so beloved, the applause didn't stop.
No.
You know, went all the way up, followed me to the stage. And I was absolutely unprepared for winning, truly. I hadn't prepared anything. I was so sure that Judy Garland was going to win for Judgment at Nuremberg. Right. I mean, all these circumstances called for it. She was in the hospital. There was a camera in the hospital. It was like a comeback performance. It was Judy not singing. It was Judy being tragic, all that stuff. And when my name was called, I was stunned. And I go up to the stage and deliver one of the worst acceptance speeches ever, except for this wonderful actress who is in Nurse Jackie, who said, thank you, I gotta go.
I love that.
I mean, that was me. I just said.
So what did you say?
I said.
I think I remember you.
I said, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
And I waited for something to come out, and then I said, good Lord, I leave you with that. And I left.
Fine.
But here's what happened with Joan Crawford and the Wings, which is these are the inside Hollywood stories that I adore. Right. So Joan Crawford was the co-MC that year. And she was married to Mr. Pepsi Cola. I don't remember.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And she had a Pepsi cooler in her dressing room, which was on stage right, Wings. Mm-hmm. And in the Pepsi cooler was a lot of vodka with Pepsi. So she was in her cups by the time I won my award. I run into the Wings and into her outstretched arms. Never met her. And she embraces me. There's a photographer right there. She embraces me and says, oh my God. And the photographer says, Miss Crawford, can I see Rita's face? She says, well, she's so upset. And I said, I'm not upset. My face isn't her. She's built like a linebacker. Right. And I said, I'm not upset. No, there. So I said, I'm not upset. And they finally had to literally wrest her fingers from me and turn me around to take a picture with her and then go to the green room to do what you're supposed to do. A week later, I'm in Manila finishing this awful, crappy World War II film, back to the Dusky Maidens roles.
Right.
And I get it. She was famous for writing notes, and sure enough, blue stationery, Joan Crawford in script, and it's a note, my darling Rita. I never did meet her, actually, even that evening. Right. She just, grabbed me and attacked me. Right. It's my darling Rita, how incredibly generous of you to stop by and talk to me after such an emotional moment in your life. Don't you love that?
So that's what the history will be.
Yeah.
The history according to Joan.
I love that.
All right, so now you've won, and I know, so now you've gone off to something else. And now, because I find this part fascinating, that in an extraordinary performance, you win the Oscar, and I think there was a great sense of, in that room, I seem to recall, of real joy that you'd won it, that you should have won it, that you were the one to win it.
Everybody in that
it was
show
the right
who won.
Yeah.
Won. There was.
That's right. And then You didn't do a movie for
7 years.
7 years.
7 years.
When is the Oscar? When is West Side Story Oscar? 64?
65 for 60, 66 for 65. I won it in 66.
66 for 65.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what was the next movie that you did?
What happened is
well, tell me about that. And
what
also
happened is that nothing was offered, and finally a few little dribbles came in to do a couple of gang movies, B movies.
Right.
And I decided then and there, you know, I've done this
been there,
so many times, because you and I haven't really gone over the horror of my Hollywood days as a young girl, and that's very well told in the book, because it's important. A lot of people don't realize what it was like in Hollywood in those times. Anyway, that's all I was offered, and I said, nope. I don't care if I don't work another day again. I am not going to play those roles anymore until Poppy with Alan Arkin.
Oh, Poppy. Oh,
wonderful.
That's
movie.
a wonderful movie.
Oh, it's a great movie.
You know, at times, a little bit, it reminds me of, I mean, I know there are many stories like this, but it's a little bit like Anne Bancroft's story, too, of, you know.
Only she got the roles. I got all the roles that Anne Bancroft, that I wanted, Bancroft got.
But I mean, the contract player, and then thinking, no, I'm going to change this. I'm going to change the way I'm seen.
Yeah.
And it takes real courage, and you did do that. So Poppy was the next one when you came back.
And again, I played a Latina, but I didn't play a cliche, stereotypical Latina. I played Alan Arkin's girlfriend, no accents.
That's Arthur Hiller?
Arthur Hiller, those amazing kids, those boys.
Great, great. Oh, it's a wonderful film.
Yeah, it's a very political film.
Yes,
I don't know if
it's
you
very
remember.
good. I do. I remember I've been being very moved by the scene when he throws himself into the ocean to trying to feel it.
He puts the kids in a boat and hopes that people will discover them as though they were coming from Cuba.
I remember later he throws
Castro,
himself
Cuba.
in the ocean to try to kind of be with them or to experience it or something.
Oh, he was,
tough stuff.
just, I love him.
Now, I don't want to, I mean, there's certain things I'd love to hear you talk about. I know you did a lot of wonderful work in television. I'd love to hear just a little bit about Carnal Knowledge, because it's Mike Nichols, and I'm sure he's great to work with, and it's a wonderful
book.
scene. And
it's an amazing, it's an amazing script.
Yeah.
It's an amazing play. Jules Pfeiffer wrote that.
Yeah.
And it was so ahead of its time. Oh my God. Do you know that the Supreme Court of Georgia banned it?
Yeah.
Georgia never saw that movie.
Well,
Imagine.
That's right.
In their wisdom, they banned the movie. And it was a great experience. It was great working with Mike. He loves actors.
Yes.
And when you're working with him in back of the camera, and he makes all of those fabulous, appreciative expressions come on his face, he's quelling over you.
How did that happen? Did you just call with an agent, or did he call you, or did you remember how that happened?
It's always a mystery to me, because I thought, why would he wanted to see me?
Yeah.
And one day I thought, I really must ask him why. Because I turned it down, mostly because I knew my husband would be very unhappy with the content. Right. It's one scene, but it's quite a scene.
It's a great scene.
Oh, it's astonishing and eerie and strange. Right. And my husband read it. He said, "You're not going to do this, are you?" I said, "It's Mike Nichols."
It's Mike Nichols.
It's Jack Nicholson.
Also means it won't be in bad taste. So you know this.
Well,
that is
but
Nichols.
To my husband, that was. You know, you have to read the script at that time.
Without realizing how, because Nichols is good that way. He has good taste.
And I turned it down, and the agent called. He said he really, really wants to see you. He wants to tell you how he's going to do this scene and all that kind of stuff. Well, by the time he was through with me, I would have followed him.
That's right.
Because, you know, the way he said, it's all about you. You know, in the best manner, a really good director who wants that particular actor, it's really about you, you know.
Right.
And in a way, it was about what happens with that character and how she becomes, what's fascinating about that character, she's a hooker, high-priced hooker, that she becomes she dominates him.
Right.
Because she has the power to satisfy him sexually, or not. So she becomes the boss, as it were.
Right.
So to that extent, the role is really very meaningful and very important. But it was a very hard scene to do because it's a monologue.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had to look into the camera as though the lens as though it were Jack. Jack was wonderful about it. He lay under that camera for days while I did that bloody monologue. And it took ever so many takes because we were on a hydraulic platform. Jules Pfeiffer described it as, it seems as though she is descending forever.
You'll remember. What's the line that you say wrong? The sky's the limit?
Oh, yeah.
A brilliant moment.
And he says, that's not what you always
That's
say.
not what you're supposed to say.
Yeah.
Is it the sky's the limit, or
I don't
that's
know.
either what you say, but it should have been something else
It should have been something like that.
like that, but it's not quite.
But it's so, which tells the audience it's a
remarkable.
ritual.
It's a ritual. It's a remarkable
She
moment.
has to say exactly the same thing every time.
Well, you're great at that. Some roles, you know, that you just define. We can't imagine anyone else doing it as well. Because I know your career pretty well, but you've done so much, and films, and much television, and so.
I loved working in Oz.
Oh yes, I would think.
Absolutely loved working in Oz because, again, talk about going against type.
Right.
I remember when I had a dinner with Tom Fontana, who produced and wrote it.
Right.
And for those who may not remember, he also did Homicide: Life on the Streets with his partner, Barry. And I had a dinner with him because he wanted to meet me and tell me what he had in mind for me. My husband was there, and we get to dessert, and I'm saying, well, all right, now let's get to business. What is it you would like me to play? Tell me about this series that you're going to do for HBO. And he tells me in some detail that it's about life in a maximum security prison. And then I thought, well, he's known for unusual casting. I thought, maybe he thinks I should be the warden. I thought, doesn't seem right. I said, what part do you have in mind for me? And I was about to put a piece of cake in my mouth, and he says, well, I want you to play the nun. I said, you want me to play a nun? And he said, yeah. And he said it like that, you know. I said, you want me to play a nun? And he says, yeah, because until then I was still doing the sexy, stupid stuff.
Wait a minute.
Not out of choice, but because that's all there was. And
He wanted a sexy nun. It's easy, Rita. You just don't.
No. He said, I said, you know, I just, you know, with my luck, this is going to be a big hit, this show. And I'm going to be stuck in a wimple for the rest of my life. And I said, I can't bear the thought of that. He said, no, God, no. I was saying Sally Field
Right.
at the time. And he said, no, she's nothing remotely like that. And he explained her to me, and I thought, wow. He said, but you have to think carefully because you're not going to look pretty. And you're not going to look youthful necessarily because the lights are going to be very harsh. Mm-hmm. So you have to decide. And I really did some deep thinking. I went home, and it took me a few days because I thought, face it, you're now, I don't know, what was I then, 50 or something like that? I don't remember. Maybe I was in my 60s. Yeah. And I said, life's going to change for you once you do something like this. And then I just said, you know what? That's okay.
You know, it's funny you say that because I always thought, I don't mean in life, I don't mean going out and being your glamorous self, but I always thought as an actress you were always, that you weren't vain at all. It always seemed to me that you had that sort of approach, that sort of Betty Davis, you know, whatever it takes, no makeup, a lot of makeup. I always had that feeling about you, so it's funny you say that because I would have thought you would have said,
it wasn't
course.
a question of vanity. It's knowing that you're going to look this way and that other people are going to judge you who are in a position
don't know.
to
Right.
employ you.
That's true.
And I lost some parts because of that. I even lost a meeting with the director for a series because he said, oh, God, she looks like a wreck.
Oh, yeah.
And it broke my heart. It just broke. I said, at least see me. I was deliberately showing up at parties I didn't want to go to show people that I really looked swell.
That's
I did, you know, going to the openings of an envelope like Sylvia Miles, because I really had to let people know that I was looking good. I've always looked good for my age, and but a lot of people who were in a position to give me a job didn't because I didn't look good in it. But it's such a crazy business I'm in. I got a ton of respect. A ton of respect.
You're a great talent. Tell me a little bit about, in any way you want, just a thought or two about Marlon Brando and your relationship? Because, you know, you're a great talent, and he's a great talent, and I'm sure that was a great part of your relationship, too. I'm sure he had
My
great...
relationship with Marlon really essentially, which turned into something else, initially was, he was gorgeous. He was the king of sexual gods. He was a Roman coin.
Right.
I mean, he really looked that way, and he had that, you know, charisma was really invented for him. Right. And then after that, it became so overused. Marlon was charismatic. Yeah. He really was. He could hold the attention of anybody in any place. I don't care how crowded it was. This is a man who just would kind of stop traffic. And what's a poor little Puerto Rican girl to do, for God's sake? So I fell madly in love with him. He fell in love with me. And then it turns out he's a major, the king of philanderers. Mm-hmm. And he was not about to be trapped into one relationship with one woman. And it took 8 years for me to wrest myself loose from that, along with a suicide attempt to help make that happen. And it wasn't an attempt. I really meant business.
Was the night of the following day early on in your relationship?
The night of the following day, the film that I did with him was after the suicide. After all that, I had a little 3-year-old girl at the time, Fernanda. And I went to do the film with my husband's full understanding, and to France to make that film with him. And it's the last time that Marlon looked good.
I only saw it when it came out, and I thought it was a wonderful movie, a fascinating,
Actually, it
great
was a fascinating movie.
Yeah.
It was a film noir.
Yeah, yeah.
It was based on a real story, the Peugeot kidnapping of the Peugeot daughter,
right?
The car company, and it was. The problem with it is that it was directed by a person who'd never directed before, who was a graphic designer. So he had a great eye. The movie had a fabulous look about it. And he had a wonderful, wonderful cameraman who I'd never seen that before. He had that camera on his shoulder all the time.
Right.
He carried the camera all the time.
That's right.
And his lighting was fascinating. It was really great looking. Richard Boone was in it.
Right, right.
And he was so sinister. He was just frightening in it. But nobody ever saw it. Nobody ever saw it.
Well, for some reason I did, and I liked it. I remember it was interesting,
It's
and
an
you were
interesting
marvelous
film.
in it.
It wasn't a great film, but it looked European.
Right.
It had a very European
And I think
look.
you had some great scenes together because you had
Wonderful.
a knowledge of each other. So
and he
it
said
was
to me, change your
very real.
image, so we put a blonde wig on me.
Right.
He put on a blonde wig. And as I said, he had just finished Last Tango in Paris, which was not out yet.
Right.
And he said, change your image. You know, come on, let's both be different. And we did, and we got along. But there's one scene that took place in that movie that is a great inside story, because it's a big story in the blogs and stuff. It's the scene where I get angry at him because I think he's been out with another woman. Mm-hmm. This all takes place in France,
right.
In Normandy, actually. And I'm very angry at him. My character is a cocaine addict. So she's a little bit kind of zonked, and she accuses him of being with somebody else, and she gets very angry and slaps him, and they fight ensues. Now, I really have a thing about violence, even when it's make-believe. I will do anything I can not to hit somebody. I can't do it.
Right.
I remember having a terrible time with Faye Dunaway because I was supposed to slap her and I couldn't do it.
Right.
And I couldn't do it, and she finally smacked me so hard I smacked her back. Then I was able to do it, but it was very hard for me. I don't like that. But Marlon said, you have to really slap me. He said, you can't fake it because I'm not going to react the right way. Boy, was he right. So we rehearsed it a lot and we improvised it. That film, we improvised most of our dialogue.
Right.
And we get to the part and I slap him. And something so frightening happened. His hairline moved back like with an animal. And he looked at me like this. This is what he would do when he was really, really, really angry. His teeth would come like this. And I thought, oh my God, he is taking, all the pond scum that we had been through together for 8 years rose up above this pool of darkness. And he hauled off. and socked me so hard on the jaw that I literally, now I know what they mean when they say, you see stars? I did. It was so hard. Got me right on the jaw. And I went berserk because now all my pond scum stuff came up. I mean, it was crazy. And I attacked him, and he got frightened of me, and he's going like this. And it's the only scene in the film that everybody who loves, it's a cult film now, says that's the realest scene. And they don't
it's
know
a great scene.
They don't know why.
Yeah.
They don't know why. The director saw it and said, I'm not cutting a thing.
It's a
That's
great
staying
scene.
just the way it is. The next day, I said to my husband, the dailies are on tonight. You go see. I said, I'm too embarrassed. You go see. So he went to see, and he came back, and he said, what a man. He said, wow, you two are really terrific actors. What a mensch.
What a mensch.
My husband.
Well, you're a mensch. You've been very, I know you're a great storyteller. I know from other times. I could listen to you and kind of, we've probably gone longer than we should have.
That would be fun. Then
I
in that
so
case, we have
thank
to
you.
have dinner.
Great.
Bring your
great,
wife.
Great. I'd love that. Just wonderful. Thank you so much,
You're
Rita.
welcome. I'm delighted.
We'll cull some from this.
Oh,
but it
I'm
was
sure
great
you
chatting
will.
with you.